In order to support his family, Hassan had to leave them against his will and hit the road. After going a long way, he felt hungry. He looked for a place to quench his hunger. He came across a town. The town was neat, tidy, and well kept, but there seemed to be something strange about the town. No one was in sight. The town seemed abandoned. As he quickened his steps to understand what was happening in this town he came from, a white cat appeared in front of him. The cat came and walked around rubbing against his feet, and crossed over and licked his paws with his tongue and cleaned his fur. While he was gazing at the beauty of the cat's fur suddenly turned black and its eyes began to shine and fire appeared. In addition, his feet were reversed. The cat stuck its tongue out and started running towards Hassan. As he ran, drool flowed from his mouth. While he was running like that, he was also saying, "Run, run, our food is on our feet." When he said this, hundreds of cats suddenly appeared. They were just like the cat trying to pounce on him. For a moment, he was at a loss as to what to do, frightened by the cat's change and coming at him. When the cat got close and jumped on him, he threw off his surprise, grabbed the cat with his hand, threw it to the ground, and started to run away. Hassan thought he was walking away from her when the other cats surrounded him. He looked around to find a way out as they surrounded him and came towards him. The cats had gotten pretty close to him, and there seemed to be no way out. When one of them pounced on him and grabbed his fingernail, he screamed and screamed for his life. These screams stopped the cats to some extent, but only to a certain extent. When the cats retreated for a while and then charged again, he looked around to see if there was anything to protect him from them, and he saw that there was a long stick to his left. After seeing the baton, Hassan made a quick move and picked it up. He disposed of all the cats that came at him with that stick. When he got rid of the cats, he said to himself, "Where did I end up in this town? What a place this town is." And he went back to get out of town. But where he came to this town, there was a huge hole. Seeing that there was no way out of the town, Hassan continued to move forward in fear. As he continued in this way, he came across a large U-shaped shopping mall. When he saw the mall, he entered the mall thinking, maybe there is someone who knows what's going on here. When he entered, he was almost frozen by the sight he saw, because it was as if it had turned into a war zone. The windows of the stores were smashed and the doors were ripped out. There was a strong smell inside and the floors were bloody. As you turn around and took a step to escape the heart-curdling, blood-curdling view of the shopping center, you came across a man with his face scratched and his head torn off, and this man collapsed as soon as he said, "Save me." As if such a frightening situation in the mall was not enough, now rats have started to come out on them from all sides. As the rats came at them, they gasped and hopped after them. Hassan, despite his fear, took courage and put the man lying on the ground on his back. To avoid being caught by the rats, he quickly walked out of the mall with the man on his back. Carefully carrying the man on his back, he walked out of town, leaving him in a cave where there was no danger. He left the cave and returned to the town full of danger, so that he could find a remedy that could heal the man. While looking for remedies in the town, he entered such a place that he could not find what to do or how to get out of it, and he was puzzled. This place he entered was the hotel of the town and resembled a complete labyrinth. When he entered the hotel, it was not possible to leave the hotel as the doors suddenly closed on him. So he had to look for a way through the labyrinths and out of the hotel. If he went to the right of the labyrinth he entered, he would come out from behind, and if he went to his left, he would return to where he came from. Although he went all the way through the labyrinth, he could not find his way, and after all, he always went back to the beginning. He came to such a place in the labyrinth that he almost tore his hair out of anger and was surprised. This place he came from was four-way, and there were signs on them that said east, west, south, north. In addition, there were other signs under each of these plates, and on these signs it was written, "This is the way you will go, the right way." And after saying what they said, he touched the plates with his foot. After Hassan touched the plates, they were ripped off, and he was quickly thrown to the ground. After the plates were thrown to the ground, hundreds of large and small fireflies emerged from under the dismantled parts of the plates and surrounded Hassan. The fireflies were sweating as they surrounded him, and they hurt him as they touched his skin. He tried to chase the fireflies with his hands to protect himself, but it couldn't work. If he got rid of one, the others would cling to him. He was at a loss as to what to do. When I got rid of the cats, he was now attacked by fireflies. Let's see what would happen to him next. Realizing that he could not get rid of the fireflies, Hassan crushed them one by one with his foot and killed them, thus getting rid of them. Hassan, who managed to escape after spending some scary moments at the hotel, came across a cute little puppy at the exit of the hotel. As she ignored the dog's cuteness and tried to get away from her, the dog followed her. Wherever he went, the puppy went, and wherever he stood, the puppy stood there. In this way, they followed each other for about an hour. At the end of this pursuit, Hassan, realizing that the dog would haunt him, stopped and turned around and looked towards the dog and saw the dog's cuteness. This puppy he saw was staring at him, sticking out his tongue and wagging his tail. When she couldn't resist the charm of the dog's cuteness any longer and approached her, the dog suddenly began to growl. His teeth grew longer and became sharper. He got up and began to walk like a spider. Drooling out of his mouth, he began to talk like a cat. When he finished speaking, hundreds of dogs surrounded him, just as cats surrounded him. They were coming at him like cats, drooling out of their mouths like rabid dogs. Noticing at the last moment that the cute little dog was coming towards him, he tried to get rid of them. But even though she got rid of him, he could hear the dogs growling and feel like he had his teeth behind him. Ever since he had come to this town, he had been so frightened and tired that he had to take refuge in a secluded place, not knowing what to do. When he rested there and came to himself, he went out. He looked carefully to his left and right. When he saw the animals, he stayed away from them. He tried not to enter houses and hotels unless he had to. He was afraid of everything in the town. It was not clear where or how danger would come into town. If it weren't for the wounded man he left in the cave, he would never have entered the town and continued on his way. But he was there and needed to be helped. So he started looking for a pharmacy, even though he was afraid of the dangers in the town. As he searched left and right, he saw a place that had been carved into the trunk of a tree and turned into a pharmacy. Proceeding cautiously, he entered the pharmacy. When he walked in, there was no one in the pharmacy. He sat down on one of the chairs there and waited, thinking that maybe the owner would come. Although he waited for a long time, when no one came, he got up and looked for something to heal the wounded man. I found them and was about to walk out the door when I heard someone say, "Whoop, my countrymen, where are you going without paying for them?" And he stopped and turned back. When I returned, behind the counter stood a small, black-faced man whose face, eyes, and hands were completely covered in pimples, and he had a line in his hand. There was no sign of mercy on the face of this black-faced man, and he kept turning the line in his hand. Every time he inhaled, he heard a wheezing sound. As he exhaled, steam came out of his nostrils, and his breath smelled uncomfortably. When Hassan saw the black-faced man, he was frightened, and his heart felt like it was going to burst. The black-faced man said when Hassan did not reply, "Didn't you hear I told you? Did you pay for what they bought?" He asked again. Hassan plunged his hands into his pockets when the black-faced man asked again. Although he looked in his pocket, when he could not find any money, he said tremblingly, frightened, "I don't have any money," said Hassan with a cowardly expression. The black-faced man got angry when he was told that he had no money, and when he called his journeyman and gestured and said to him, "What do we do with those who have no money here?" His journeyman nodded and said, "Okay, I understand," and went with quick steps, locked the door of the pharmacy, and covered the window of the pharmacy with curtains. When the door of the pharmacy was locked, the black-faced man took a chain out of his pocket and began to come at Hassan. This man was waving the chain in his hand and turning the line in his hand at the same time. The black-faced man was about to swing the chain in his hand and hit Hassan, but Hassan stepped to the right. At that moment, the head of the chain touched his head slightly, tearing the curtain behind him. From there, when he hit the glass shattered. When the window of the pharmacy was broken, he took advantage of this opportunity to turn around and jump over the broken glass and start running out of the pharmacy, ignoring the blood flowing from his head. When the black-faced man noticed that Hassan had escaped through the window, he ran after him and threw the line in his hand. The line he threw went past Hassan's ear and stuck into a tree. At the end of a day of fears, he left the town to join the wounded man he had left in the cave. When she saw the injured man, she said to herself, "I'm glad I learned the rules of first aid. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to help this man." and with the first aid rules he had learned, he first bandaged his head and made the blood stop. Then, in order to treat the injured man, he cleaned his wounds using the drugs he had on hand. The man had been hit and battered so many times that the fact that he survived despite these blows was an indication that he had a very strong constitution. The injured man could not regain consciousness after the treatment he received. On top of that, he kept moaning, "Save me." However, he was able to recover a little in the morning. At that moment, he moved his lips slightly, saying that he was thirsty and wanted to drink water. Hassan, who was happy that the wounded man came to his senses and asked him for water, immediately left the cave and returned to the town where he had feared moments to search for water. In the town, again, everything seemed to be normal. There seemed to be nothing to be afraid of. Although there was nothing to be afraid of, he nevertheless entered the town cautiously, looking for a fountain from which he could get water. At the junction of the two intersections, he saw a fountain with two taps. He walked towards the fountain, looking to his left and right. As he was about to come to the fountain and get some water, he was startled when a hand reached out behind him and grabbed his arm. The man holding her arm said to her, "I have finally caught you. So, you'll run away from me." And he turned away. Upon his return, the owner of the pharmacy was the black-faced man who had to leave without paying for the things he bought because he had no money in the pharmacy. When the black-faced man saw Hassan looking back at him, he said, "No one has ever escaped from me without paying for the things he has taken from me." And he grabbed his throat with his hands and began to squeeze it. At that moment, Hassan almost drowned. In this state, he could die if he didn't do something. Gathering his strength, he struck the black-faced man's stomach vigorously with his knee. When the black-faced man who had been hit in the stomach stepped back, he punched him with his fist. The black-faced man staggered to the ground with the last blow he received. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he rushed away. When he got rid of it completely, he was out of breath and wanted to sit down and rest. But where could he sit? Nowhere was safe. Wherever he went, whatever he did, something was always happening to him in this town. Looking for a safe place and unable to find one, he walked into the interior of the town. There, he saw a green field surrounded by walls. Thinking that maybe it was safe here, he headed towards it and jumped the wall and sat down on the green area. As he leaned back to sit down and rest for a while, an army of ants suddenly surrounded him. These ants were getting closer and closer, banging their pincers against each other, and red light was emitting from their eyes like fire. These ants were whispering among themselves, "Finally, our food has come to us." When Hassan saw the horrible state of the ants, he suddenly jumped up and ran away from the green field. The ants did not let go of him even though he was moving away. They followed him wherever he went, and there seemed to be no way to get rid of the ants. He had to stop when he got to the middle of the road through the town, because a big car was coming fast. On the one hand, the car was coming towards him, and on the other hand, the ants had pinned him down and were about to catch him. When he was about to get caught by the ants, the oncoming car sped past the ants. When the car passed over them, all the ants under the car were crushed to death on the spot. The other ants, who were saved from being crushed under the car at the last moment, said, "You caused the death of our family. We will cause your death," and they marched towards Hassan. On top of that, they had taken the form of a ball, and this ball was getting bigger and bigger. While Hassan was rejoicing that he had gotten rid of the ants, he heard the words of the other ants and was horrified. In addition, the ants had become larger than him. Ants pounced on him in a ball and bit him all over, so much so that there was no place left unbitten and the bitten places were crimson. He put his back to the ground to get rid of them. Then he turned to the right and turned to the left. Their crackle came at every turn. This is how he got rid of the ants. Having survived another danger, Hassan hit the road again in search of water. Towards evening, he saw another fountain and arrived there. After looking around to see if there was any danger, he filled the bottle in his pocket with water and returned to the cave. The wounded man was writhing with thirst in the cave, wanting to drink water as soon as possible. When Hassan was late, he thought to himself, "I wonder where he has been. Has something happened to him?" and waited for Hassan to come as soon as possible. When he saw Hassan at the entrance of the cave, he said to Joy, "Where have you been? When you didn't come, I thought something had happened to you in the town." And when he saw her head wrapped around him, he asked her why she was wrapped around her head. Hassan recounted the incident between him and the black-faced man to find out why his head was bandaged. When the wounded man heard what had happened to Hassan, he said, "He, the black-faced man, is the most evil man in our town, who sees nothing but money. Everything was fine before he came to our town and opened a pharmacy. The people of our town helped each other, took care of their neighbors, and fed the poor. No one would talk behind anyone's back or dig a well. He would take the fallen by the hand and extend a helping hand. After he came to our town and opened the pharmacy, he caused all the beauties and goodness of our town to change. His habit that caused our town to change was that he was very money-loving and wordy. That is, because of him, people fell out with each other. The wealthy people did not care for the poor when they saw him. They shot him after the fallen, and he was the one who invited those evil beings to our town. And then he said, 'Water, water,' and fainted again. When Hassan noticed that the wounded man had fainted, he went up to him, grabbed him by the back, and gently lifted him to his feet. Taking the water out of his pocket, he lightly sprinkled water on his face and removed the bandages to clean his wounds. He applied ointment to them and dressed their wounds with a new bandage. Despite the treatments he was given, he was constantly moaning and saying, 'Don't do it, don't do it.' Although she didn't understand why he said that, she cleaned and bandaged his wounds again to keep her moaning all the time and waited to see what would happen. In the meantime, he had lost track of time as he had been dealing with the wounded man, and it was already dark and it was night. So he lit a fire in the cave and left the cave to spend the night. Gathering brushwood around the cave, he returned to the cave. By burning the brushwood he had collected in the cave, he warmed himself and checked on the wounded man. When midnight came, the wounded man's groans ceased, and he slowly began to regain consciousness. She felt what she needed in the minutes when she began to recover, but she had to hold back, because the injured man began to regain consciousness and asked for water again. So he took care of the man and had to restrain himself. When the wounded man drank water and fell asleep, only then was he able to go out to satisfy his needs. While he was trying to meet his needs and go back, the weather suddenly deteriorated. Lightning began to flash, and then it began to rain. When the rain slowly fell and increased in intensity, he wanted to speed up and return to the cave. When he reached the entrance of the cave, he struck such a bolt of lightning that he threw himself into the cave with difficulty. At that moment, the entrance to the cave collapsed with a great noise, blocking the entrance. The entrance to the cave was completely closed, so where could they get out? Inside the cave, there seemed to be no way out. He sat and thought about these things, making plans on how he could get out of the cave. While he was thus lost in thought, the wounded man came to his senses completely and asked what was going on outside. When the wounded man came to him and asked him a question, he said sadly, getting rid of his thoughts, "The entrance to the cave was closed due to heavy rain. When the entrance to the cave was closed, I looked for a place to get out of it, but I could not find it." And the wounded man pointed to a place in the upper part of the cave with his hand and said, albeit with difficulty, "I know this cave like the back of my hand. There is a small entrance here. If you can make me stand up, I can show you. But this is the mansion of evil beings, so we have to be careful." He began to think after the wounded man gestured with his hand and pointed to the exit of the cave. Since the inside of the cave was completely dark, how could he point to the place? They had found a way out of the cave, but how were they going to get out of it? Moreover, there were also evil beings. As they made their way through the cave they entered, the sounds of babies could be heard from all sides. The wounded man knew that these voices were coming from evil beings, so he said to Hassan, "Watch out for those baby sounds. They are a deception of evil beings. If you are deceived by those voices and go where the sound is coming from, you will interfere with them." After the baby voices, the sounds of laughter were heard. Then smoke-like beings were seen. Seeing the smoke-like beings, Hassan hugged the wounded man in fear. Even the wounded man was afraid. Even he. "I knew that evil beings were in this cave, but I had never come across them until now." "What are we going to do now?" said Hassan, hugging the wounded man. "I don't know," said the wounded man. Smoke-like evil beings were circling around them, laughing and trying to scare them. While they were hugging each other in fear, a voice was heard in the distance, saying that he would recite Surah Al-Ayat, Falaq, and Surah Nas. As soon as they heard the sound coming from afar, they They started reading. As they read, the evil beings were screaming, "Don't read, don't read." The man who came from afar was reciting Surah Safat on the one hand and Surah Jinn on the other. As they read from the inside and men from the outside, the evil beings ran away screaming. Eventually, the evil beings disappeared. When they disappeared, they managed to get out of the cave with the wounded man. After they came out, they searched for the person who had freed them from those evil beings, but they could not find them. Who knows what they would have been like if he hadn't told them to read the scriptures. So they prayed behind the man who saved them. After getting rid of the evil beings, the wounded man turned to Hassan and said, "Brother, whatever you came to this town for, quit your job and get away from here quickly. Otherwise, the curse in this town will infect you." And Hassan took pity on the wounded man. So he said to him, "Since this town is cursed, then let's get out of this town with you. Look, you're already injured, and we'll get your wounds treated that way," he said to the injured man. The wounded man thought for a while after his words. Then he said to her, "Brother, thank you for your offer, but I can't go with you," he said, bowing his head. Hassan was surprised that he did not expect this word from the wounded man. So I told him, "Why don't you want to come?" he said curiously. "The curse has infected us all. That's why I die as soon as I step out of the town's borders. That's why I can't get out," the wounded man said. Then he asked Hassan, "Do you know the ages of the people in this town?" On this question, Hassan said, "No, I don't know. The average age of the people in this town is between 200 and 250. Our oldest is 400 years old," said the wounded man. When Hassan heard about the average age of the town, his mouth sank. The wounded man, seeing his astonishment, said, "None of us can die because of this curse. As you can see, we will live like this until the end of the world." After receiving an answer, Hassan said to the wounded man, "And what is your age?" he asked the wounded man. "My age is 300, the wounded man said in response to Hassan's question. Then he said, "That's why you leave this town immediately without looking back. Oh, and when you leave town, don't drink the town's water. Otherwise, this curse will infect you, and you will suffer this curse for life like us. And you'll never get out of this town." Hassan stood up after the wounded man's words, leaving him there. Then he started running like that, which he had never run like in his life. While he was running, the animals that had attacked him inside the town were trying to attack him again, all the way to the town's borders. When they reached the limits of the town, they stopped chasing him and returned to the town.